So this is ninth lecture, as you know, in the series, and third lecture in the series of SEM. So today I will explain about backscattered electrons and how they are detected and what information they carry. Advantage is that you know a lot about backscattered electrons now, and it will happen that I will start a topic and you will say, "Oh, I already know because you have already taught me few things about that topic." But every time you will get a deeper information. So the information I'm going to share about this topic is next level than you already know through this course. And you won't be surprised if I come back on backscattered electrons after a few more lectures and I give you some more interesting information. So this is the design of this course so that uh, same topics are touched upon in an iterative fashion. So if you have any query, you can basically you build up on step by step on the same topic. So every topic will be touched several times. So I don't know how this design happened in this course, but it's really benefiting students uh, quite a lot. Otherwise, backscattered electrons, like there's one lecture and that's it. I mean, you don't touch it afterwards, but it is not happening here. So backscattered electrons are uh, caused by the collision of incident electrons with the sample atoms, primarily with the electron nucleus interaction, and these electrons are kicked in the opposite direction. And so we can call them backward, scattered electrons. So they have to be detected in the same direction from where the primary beam is coming. And these electrons are elastically scattered electrons. So they are pretty much high energy electrons. So they can penetrate, they can actually escape from subsurface areas. So that's the reason that they carry information about deeper parts of the samples. So for example, if you try to compare secondary electron image and backscatter electron image. So obviously there will be three immediate differences that backscatter electrons will carry information about composition. On the other hand, secondary electron image will carry information about topography. Obviously, I'll teach you today that how you can get the topography information from backscatter electrons as well. So that depends upon the detector. So you have to, uh, set up the detector in such a way that you either get information about composition or about the topography. But mixing both is not a good idea because either of the information will be masked by other one. So second difference is that resolution of secondary electrons image is always higher than the backscattered electrons. The reason, the logic behind that is very simple, that interaction volume becomes bigger and bigger because backscatter electrons are higher in energy. So obviously they will carry the information from the deeper level. So that's the reason that the resolution gets worse for backscatter electrons. Third difference between backscatter electrons and secondary electrons is that uh, backscatter electrons, as we have already noticed, that they carry the information from the subsurface. Secondary electrons, they carry information from the top surface. So we are going to see many examples from like comparative studies from both the techniques. So I think I have shown you these images earlier, but this is just a recap of some images from the sample chamber. You can see here the final lens, which um, basically collimate and basically you know there is a scan coil there, so which basically raster scan the electrons. There are a couple of other things, astigmator and which is used to correct the astigmatism. So obviously those things are all there. That's why it is like final length is written here. So sample stage, you can move up and down, left and right, and you can see the specimen kept here. And the secondary detector in all these figures, which I'm going to show, is out of sight, but it is located at the top right corner, which is not shown in these images. So you can see that working distance we are changing here. It is 7 mm working distance. And in the previous lectures, you saw the correlation between working distance and the depth of focus, and how the images, the information about the image can be um, can be changed by increasing or decreasing the working distance. And also you saw that smaller working distance give you better resolution, right? And larger working distance gives you worse resolution, right? But better depth of field, and those things you saw actually. That a smaller working distance worsen the depth of focus. So everything has disadvantages and advantages. Also, one more thing you are going to learn today, that larger working distance tends to damage less. There is a less damage to your sample if you increase the working distance. Suppose you are, and this is the problem which students face quite commonly, that sample get damaged under the electron beam, and there is a lot of charging. So to avoid these problems, so if you increase the working distance, so the beam broadening will be happening, like beam size will increase, and that's the reason that the resolution becomes worse. But the advantage is that sample damage will be less, because current density will increase. So you are bombarding, the current is the same, but the current density will decrease, right? Because you're increasing the area. I hope you get my point. So these are other settings, no backscatter detector. So I think I can skip these images. There's nothing much to explain me here, but it is always good to connect uh, with the machine. And this is the best way you can connect with the machine here through the images. Okay, anyway, it is mostly done by operator in most of the institutes in India, at least. Abroad also, I mean, unless you get trained, hands-on training, you're not allowed to enter into the microscopy room. So most of the time you have to analyze your images, and that's what we do in our course. So, but I try to give flavor to the detectors and their functioning and the machine, so you are not completely, unaware about inside the machine, though it is not required, but you should be aware of these things. Okay, so topographical contrast, that's a question which is routinely asked. And so I have included several slides onto that. Normally, there is no topography contrast, and it is avoided in uh, backscatter electrons, because you would like to primarily see the contrast, which is, when I say contrast, it is actually the intensity variation, right? Contrast means, uh, what do you mean by contrast? I will teach you probably one course about contrast, because there is a lot of confusion on that. So normally I don't teach that, because I mean, it's too many lectures. But I will see if there is some time left, so I will teach you in detail about contrast. Okay, anyway, so now you can understand that contrast, brighter contrast or darker contrast. Brighter contrast means brighter image, or more contrast. I should not use brighter contrast or darker contrast, it's a wrong term. But more contrast, basically more intensity is coming. So you see those areas lighter, right? So you don't to rightly interpret the images, it's better you avoid charging effects, and also you affect any you do not want to get any topography information there. So purely chemical information about like compositional information. Um, so due to relatively high energy of these backscatter electrons, they are they do not enter into the Everett-Thornton detector, because Everett-Thornton detector, I think we discussed this point. I mentioned that even though there is a positive bias on Everett-Thornton detector, but backscatter electrons won't go there. They just they are not deflected actually by they're not uh, you know by short-term gain. They go to their aim basically, right? It's like you delayed what do you call it, sense gratification, right? Suppose you are uh, uh, okay, so you are working and and then uh, you see somebody calls you, okay, let's go for a cup of tea. That is a distraction. That is, I mean, suppose you are the backscatter electrons, you would like to study and then go to your aim, which is your detector, rather than going for a cup of tea, which is basically equivalent to distraction actually, or checking your mobile phone. So a backscattered electron is very smart, so it will directly go to the detector. Ah, yes. So, but you can locate, uh, but the detector can be located on one side of the specimen. You saw the images that backscatter electron detector is concentrically located right underneath the lens. So you basically get the equal amount of it is designed to get the equal amount of flux from your specimen. For example, I'll show you. Yes. So it is, you can see that it is designed that you get equal amount of flux. So this is basically electron uh, scattering cone. We'll discuss in the next lectures what does it mean. So basically it's a scattering cone which we basically calculate by solid angle, omega. So this is the detector, the what do you call it? The, I don't know the color, base color. Manisha can tell me somebody. I don't know. I'm not very good with color, or women are good with color. So you can see that it is split into some parts. So that is cleverly designed. I will discuss about. Um, so you can do differential um, collection of charges. So basically, it is there in the atomic force microscopy also. So you can basically look at the. It is split into four parts: one, two, three, four, and they are not connected with each other. So you can basically calculate how many electrons are reaching here, 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 here. So you can have better information about the topography and so it has brilliant. It's a brilliant idea actually to split into four parts. And right, yeah. So if you put it on one side, then you will have the same strong shadowing effect which you normally see in secondary electron images, that dramatic effect of lighting from one side, right, which you saw in the last lecture. It's a dramatic effect, actually, right? Shadow and light and all kinds of things. And but those dramatic effects you do not see in the backscattered electrons because there is no drama here. It's a direct electron hitting the detector, okay, from all directions symmetrically. So it's more symmetrically located rather than asymmetrically. So backscatter electrons are electron detector is symmetrically located, and secondary electron uh, detector is asymmetrically located in one corner. So it creates a lot of drama, like you see on the stage. Some people might have seen the stage, especially Marathi students. They are very good, Marathi stage or Bengalis. they watch stage programs, and probably in your colleges you might have participated. So there are lights which are located at an angle, and you can see morning light and evening uh, sunset. Okay. So this example shows how you can differentiate between uh, high Z and low Z elements. In this case, aluminum and copper. So uh, obviously, you will get more scattering from copper. So that's why it looks brighter. Yeah, so you can see that it is advisable that you have a flat sample when you are trying to get backscattered uh, information, and uh, that's you can see that this is I was just discussing about the detector backscatter detector, which is split into four parts. So now you can see that here this part and this part receives equal amount of uh, electrons in this case, right? If the if the electrons are if the electron beam is focused on one point where composition is obviously, you have certain composition which is probing. So if the topography is the same, so no reason that this detector and this detector will uh, get different information. But if there is any topographical variation, so this detector and this detector will get different amount of information. So that is the reason that detector is cut into four parts. So just to check, so that basically cross checks the topography information, and it's very now you know that it's a very smart design to avoid topography information. Okay, so uh, so basically, what it mentions here is that some image emphasizes the compositional differences, right, and minimizes the topography information, right. You take a sum of that, right, and it is described here that you can do it. I mean, you can use backscattered electrons in the compositional mode, BS comp, or topographical mode. This is the copper grid on a carbon background. Usual copper, the TM grid, I believe. So, and you can see the scale bar here is 100 micrometer, and the accelerating voltage for the electrons is 15 kilowatt. Okay, and you can see the BS is written here. So let's go step by step. You can see that secondary electrons gives you beautiful information about topography, where the recesses are basically black, and the areas which are protruding out, they are uh, uh, they are shown as the brighter areas. And if you see compositional analysis, so here you can see that copper is brighter and carbon is quite dark. Actually, carbon is quite dark. Actually, I mean, you don't see much scattering, backscattering from the carbon. But interestingly, if you see the topographical information, DS backscattered topographical information, so there is some information here. You can see that there is a topographic information, but there is zero compositional information. There is no compositional information, but there is some topographical information. And we have already discussed that secondary electrons have better topography information because the resolution is better. And another thing is that subsurface information is more prominent in backscattered electrons. So you can see that it is there, but it is not as good as you would see in secondary electrodes, right? So it is normally not recommended that you use, I mean, for obvious reasons. So this basically, I think, convinces you about differing utilities of these three. modes. So as I mentioned that it is preferable to use a flat sample if you would like to get best compositional information, but it is not required because detector will take care of detector design will take care of that. Working principle is based on, so it is basically a silicon detector, silicon based detector. So you have a band gap and electrons which carry certain energy from 5 electron to 50 electron volt. So these differing amount of energy will generate electron hole pairs. That means one electron can generate more than one electron hole pairs, and generation of electron hole pairs will be proportional to the energy which that electron is carrying actually. That is that's okay. So if you have any secondary electrons reaching there, somebody asked this question I think earlier, that what about secondary electrons reaching to the ulta, the secondary electrons reaching to the backscatter detector. We have reverse, we have already discussed that backscatter electrons are much higher in energy, so they generally do not get deflected towards secondary electron detector, average Thornton detector, which is at one side. It is oddly placed for purposefully that you can okay, you can deflect less determined uh, uh, poor guys, you know, secondary electrons which do not have much energy. उनको deflect करना, उनको disturb करना आसान है. Okay. So for example, there are two students in the class. It is easier to distract and disturb the students which are less determined, but the students who are strongly determined, it is not very easy to distract and okay, deviate them. They will reach to their target. Okay, so but secondary electrons will not. They carry less amount of energy, and relatively they will be identified because they won't be able to create as many electron hole pair here. So that is the okay. So that is basically PN junction diode. It's a diode. You know, PN P doped silicon and N doped silicon, and you merge them. So there will be a depletion layer, and there will be some voltage which will develop, and then that is basically used as a diode. And you know that. Um, so uh, so that will be connected uh, by two electrodes. So you can separate electron and hole, and that completes the electric current. Okay, and that current is proportional to amount of absorbed scattered electrons. So it is a donut arrangement. I think we have already uh, discussed that. And in order to maximize the collection of backscatter electrons, they consist of symmetrically divided parts. That's very uh, important. Divided parts. We saw that when all parts are on, enabled, right? I mean, they are enabled to detect. So contrast of image will affect the atomic number of. So basically, some of those parts will okay will okay. And if you enable specific quadrants, right? So it is basically split into quadrants. 1, 2, 3, 4. So then you can isolate topographical information from the images. I hope it is clear. So these slides were not there earlier in the earlier lectures, earlier classes. So this time I thought to include them. And there are more examples, more and more to bore you here. If you want to get bored, you can see that this is again copper grid mounted on aluminum stub. So you can see that omnidirectional DAC signal, okay, here, and it's a topographical mode. And this is another image here. And you can see, you will appreciate the depth of field, which is quite beautiful actually. You can see the depth of field here. You can see the grains very clearly, even the depth, deeper areas. But don't try to attempt to know their depth. You will get lost into the depth. There's no depth sensitivity, but it's a false sense of depth. Some people try to do that. Don't do that. Some students ask this question about close by Z, elements with close by Z. It's not. So this is not a. I mean, I say that it is not possible, and it is, yes, it is not possible. It's a very bad technique, but you can see one example here. Titanium, which is Z is equal to 22, and nickel, where Z is equal to 28. You can see that there is hardly any difference, but you can make out. This is the compositional image, backscatter, right? And this is the secondary electron image, where you don't see any compositional difference, but you do see um, a beautiful topographical information. So it is here, nickel wire is wrapped around titanium wire. So you might be wondering which one is which. Okay, so uh, underneath is, this is titanium, okay, and this is nickel. Okay. You will, that's why you see titanium is 22, so it will scatter less electron in comparison. But you can see that what you can see the proof of what I said, that there is not, there has to be a substantial, but it is, I mean, you can't detect obviously neighboring element. Don't do that. I mean, you can't. It will be very difficult for you to differentiate between, for example, manganese and cobalt, manganese and iron. Okay, don't do that. It's not easy. Yeah, silicon and titanium is easy. So you can see that it's a dust. It's a titanium. It should be titanium oxide, not titanium. That it is just written like that. It is silicon oxide. So you can see that this is brighter. Obviously, this is brighter. You can see this is titanium oxide. This is titanium oxide. This is titanium oxide. This is silicon oxide. You can, so once you get an idea, you can. It won't take you any time, and you start picking up right stone, uh, right pebble for you. And here you can see that there's no compositional contrast. Voltages, keep noting the voltage and other details. So 20 kilo electron volt, 20 kilo electron volt, 100x, and the image is, scale bar is 100 micrometer. And this is backscatter, and this is secondary electron. Okay. And these are obvious things in case when more repetition. So what is the reason that backscattered image resolution is lower than SE resolution? It's again same thing. Okay, again same figure. So I think you don't need that. So I have answered this question several times. Coating and composition information. I explained this in the last lecture, but there is a repetition that if you are looking for compositional information, then don't coat over your sample with the with all these iron, palladium, whatever it is, some kind of metal. Don't do that. And I also mentioned that in case you are having charging problems, so ask the operator to coat with carbon, because carbon won't have any backscattering, very little backscattering. So you are safe if you're coating with carbon. So carbon you can coat, but don't coat anything else. This is already explained. So it's a beautiful image actually. I showed this image earlier. I'm showing it again. So this gives you the information that At 5 kilo electron volt, you have primarily secondary electrons contributing, and you can see surface information. Primarily, you see surface information, and if you compare this and this, you see subsurface information also. That's the point which this image is trying to tell you. Other than that, other than this looks more beautiful, and this is actually so there is significant backscattered information here, and same 20 micron for a comparison. I mean, when you are comparing between several images, please do not change the scale bar. Many times students change the scale bar, and it is a crime in the microscopy, right? If you want to compare, so do not please change the scale bar. Keep the scale bar same. Troubleshooting in SEM, troubleshooting is edge effect, charging, and sample damage. We have been discussing these problems, but here we'll have systematic study. So, problem number one: lack of detail of surface structure. So, if you are tempted to use higher kilo voltage, so we saw in the previous image, so beam will penetrate much deeper, and it will make a larger fusion volume, and it will result into signal coming out of all kinds of volume. So you will have you will lose the uh, finer structure. So that's the idea that you would like to solution is that uh, exclude this backscatter, like you use lower kilo electron. So for example, if you see the problem that you're not able to see the surface structures which you are trying to see, so request the operator to reduce the voltage. So the operator will reduce the voltage, and then you will see. So it's a good idea to start with the lower voltages and then capture several images, and then so lower voltages are always better. Um, they do less damage, less charging. Okay, so lower energy provides better detail about the top surface, right? Surface, okay, not the subsurface. Sometimes you are looking at the subsurface information, then you can obviously increase the voltage. That's the thumb rule. Edge effects are there all the time, and so peaks and edges will look brighter. You will see that they are just like lighting up, because edges, you know that these edges will contribute to more secondary electrons reaching to the detector in comparison to the other areas. So if you see certain areas lighting up, so you can see that, for example, you see these areas lighting up. So these are basically like edges, sharp edges. And I'll show you more images. These are actually rounded. You don't see edge effect that much because these are rounded pebbles. So some charging you can see here, because silica and titania both are titania is a semiconductor, but silicon oxide is perfect insulator. So you're going to see a lot of charging, but in the sample they might have coated and put them in the ground them with a carbon tape or something. Okay, underneath there is always a carbon tape, so you put it. So the electrons which are, you're bombarding so much of electrons, so you have to uh, make sure that you keep these particles neutral. One way is that you are pulling the secondary electrons out. So if the or backscatter electrons out, so if the number of electrons falling onto the sample is more than the number of electrons uh, uh, exiting the sample, either secondary electrons or backscatter electrons. then you will have net accumulation of charges, and that negative charge which has piled up on your samples will pose Coulombian repulsion from fresh electrons which are trying to escape from your sample. So they will see this, you know, top area which is negatively charged, and then they will uh, there will be something called like screening effect. It will screen off the, okay. So that's the problem. So you can see the charging effect. Let me show you. You might have seen, I think I showed you the charging effect several times. Yeah. So charging we have already discussed. So edge effect we have discussed. Lack of surface structure. So solution is the same. Um, so level of charge will be related to energy as well as energy of the electrons and the number of electrons. So number of the electron is basically the beam current. Number of electrons is basically proportional to current or current density. How many electrons are, we have to reduce the current actually. So beam current. So that's a one way of doing that. So obviously you can reduce voltage, which is the best. Uh, yeah. So and so number of electron related number of parameters include beam current, the emissive level of the, you will see it later on. The spot size you can reduce. Obviously it's basically increase spot size. So when you increase the spot size, basically you are decreasing the current density. The current density goes down. That's another way. If you don't want to play with the beam current, if you want to keep the beam current same, you can always increase the spot size. That will reduce the overall current density. Yeah. So this is the image of beetle, and if you see this kind of, and you see many times, you see this kind of horizontal fringes. You can see this dark line and bright and dark. So those are because of the charging effects. So there are two solutions. One is you coat again. That means your coating of platinum was not sufficient, so you have to coat it one more time. Here, one can pre-treat. It's not a coating. Please, treat it with osmium tri or tetroxide vapor. So that's one way of doing things. Charging issues are there is you can do always fast scan rate, so you don't dwell time you can reduce. So dwell time is always good. If you keep higher dwell time, if you stay on one spot for longer time, you get better signal to noise ratio. But you can see that uh, but that increases the charging and damage. Okay, there is always a trade-off. Nothing is absolute. So so that is one way, and I will explain. This is beautiful technique. Actually, this is very beautiful technique. So you can use low vacuum capabilities, and in ESEM, in environmental scanning electron microscope, where you can put all kinds of wet sample and in low vacuum, but there is no charging actually, which is surprising, right? And the answer is very simple. Why there is no charging there? So there is no need to coat metal in environmental SEM, and so there is a very interesting mechanism in environmental SEM. So low vacuum, obviously it compromises the resolution. So otherwise you can always uh, throw away conventional SEM and welcome ESEM, but everything comes at a cost. So ESEM, you can compromise with the resolution, but then you have no problem with the charging, and you don't need any coating. You don't need to coat if you are doing it in low vacuum. I'll tell you the trick later on. Yeah. So yeah, sample preparation method and all kinds of things. Yeah, so you can see another Beetle. Um, you can see the charging effect selectively. So the question I had put here that loose materials such as particles often suffer from charging. What is the reason? Hmm? Any answer from the audience? Serious thing. So now I hope it is clear that loose materials will suffer from charging because they are not properly grounded, basically. So they will keep on accumulating the charges. You can see that those some of those particles which are here, and they don't show charging, but some of the particles which are placed on the top, they're not properly grounded. This is carbon tapes, I believe. I don't have much information about this sample preparation, but this is the normal specimen damage is a big problem. You can see the example here, and this example you see all the time. I have seen it so many times. Sample damage. So this image, let me explain to you what this image is. So you can see this scale bar is quite large, 200 micron. So this a person operator might have scanned first this area, right? And then after scanning and capturing the images, might have zoomed to the larger area. And when the person zoomed to the larger area, the person saw that artifact of because that beam has already damaged during the scanning. So the better way is to go from low resolution you capture, because in low resolution you don't damage the sample because your current density is very small. So when you start zooming, you are increasing your current density, right? Because your area is becoming, current is the same, but you are decreasing the area. So the damage starts happening actually. Obviously, you can play with other things. Actually, you can okay, you can play with the decreasing the current and everything, but it's there. Most of the time, you can see that. So this is because of some organic. You guys are so careful in handling the samples that whenever we used to get samples from AFM, people will. I mean, there were all kinds of students who used to, or industry people, वो लेके आएंगे हाथ में पकड़ के हाथ से AFM करना है, high resolution image ले चाहिए हमें, बहुत बढ़िया, sir, you give me very high resolution. I said, where is your sample? They will open the sample box. सर लीजिए, एकदम हाथ पे पूरा पकड़ के उंगलियों से पूरा, सर लीजिए सैंपल, ये रखिए अपने हाथ में, इस सैंपल पे मुझे एटॉमिक रेजोल्यूशन इमेज चाहिए. मैंने कहा बढ़िया, एटॉमिक रेजोल्यूशन हो गई आपकी, और अब पूरा फिंगरप्रिंट ग्रीस सब लगा के लाएंगे उसके, सब छींक करके और सब बढ़िया, है ना, उसपे छींक देंगे, खांस देंगे पूरी अच्छी तरह से, है ना, सब. तो सब एटॉमिक रेजोल्यूशन, सब सारे एटम्स आ जाएंगे सारे हाथ के फिंगरप्रिंट. सो ये तो हमारी स्टाइल है. So don't do that. Okay. So even if you have silicon oxide or any other oxide surface, where does this carbon come from? So there is this area is carbon. Carbon is actually coming from your those adventures. You are touching the samples by hand. You should not do that.
Sir,
Sir Hemant. हाँ जी, बोलिए हेमंत जी.
Sir, actually, I have a question. सर ये आप सैंपलिंग के टाइम पे आप ये बताएंगे ना कि हम कैसे सैंपल बनाएंगे?
Yes, yes, it's there in my slides.
ओके सर।
So one thumb rule is that do not uh, do not use your hands or teeth to touch your sample. Don't hold even. I mean, I told you not to use your fingers, but don't say that. Oh, you did not tell me. Not to use my teeth. I can hold my sample by my teeth. Many people, they when their fingers do not work to open the envelope. So we Indians, we start using. We have our animal instinct actually. Our animal instinct जाग जाती है, right? We start using, like chips ka packet. I think kids know how to open it, right spot. They will just tear it open. Okay, and adults will give up, and they will कोई देख तो नहीं रहा है, इधर उधर, and they will just use their teeth to open the packet. Don't do that with your samples. It's not allowed. Okay, even if nobody is watching you, don't do that, because microscopes can pick up what you did with your sample, how abused. It's better to use. There are special tweezers, Teflon coated flat tweezers. I'll show you the toolkit. So there are special tools to handle the uh, uh, samples for microscopy. So don't use the tweezers which you use normally in the lab. If you do not have those special tweezers, one trick is that you take Teflon tape and wrap around those tongs, actually whatever you have, that those tweezers, two arms, you wrap enough uh, Teflon, and that's what I used to do. Okay, and then once your job is done, you can change the Teflon coating. You can just throw it away, Teflon tape. That's what I use in my entire career as a student. So whenever I needed a clean surface, I won't trust a clean surface, even if it is clean. Or you clean it really. I was really very um, um, what do you call it? Hindi में एक बहुत बढ़िया word है, sun key. I have a sun key with cleanliness in the lab, not in my on my dining table. You know, or on my study table, I will leave everything scattered. But when I do serious science, I don't use the same standard which I use on my dining table. You will find all the food particles coated on my fingers, clothes, and shirts, everything. Okay, so that does not mean that you if you see me eating somewhere, you don't uh, don't judge me that this person cannot be a good scientist. Okay, I have different standards. So, but make sure that you also have different standards. Okay? When it comes to science, you have different standards. Okay? So coating is normally done. You should not overcoat it, and that's normally done, not done by chemistry students. Physics students, they do normally. Sometimes they do their own sample preparation, but normally chemistry students, they outsource it to the right person. So don't coat too much, just enough for a conductive layer. You just need a conductive layer. Okay? So then any uh, misadventure you might have done, it will be taken care of. Another thing is that you don't get much contrast, much secondary electrons and backscatter electrons from uh, biology samples. Uh, so this coating of heavy elements uh, create a replica of it's a beautiful thing. Actually, it's basically give you beautiful topography on biological samples. Okay, uh, and see in shadow effect, images are awesome actually on biological samples. Just you coat it enough, and okay. So, for example, you are in for example, you are in in Holi, you somebody throws a bucket full of paint on you. Okay, you can try it this time on Holi, and how will you look like? Everybody can see your topography still. Okay. Just imagine yourself coated with a thick white paint, not the holy color, the thin one. Okay, that viscous. And so same thing you can do with the biology samples. So normally you do the sputtering magnetrons. It's called magnetron sputtering. So you can. It's a very small, simple machine. Very easy. Don't get frightened up by the looks of some weird looking physics stuff. Okay, it's a simple machine. You can handle it. Mounting the SEM stub. So that is where your contribution comes. You can see that if you want to minimize the charging, so the contact area should be maximized. Okay, so you put either you put silver paste here. But silver paste has a problem because it will leave residues on your sample in case you want to reuse it. So it is better, or there is a carbon tape which is one side sticky, so you can remove the layer and then you can glue it onto the stub, stainless steel stub, and then you can put your. Okay, so it depends upon your choice whether you would like to use silver paint or carbon paint. It depends upon your sample. Suppose you want to recover it. So, but there are all kinds of options. So this SEM sample preparation toolkit. It's not that kind of a toolkit, right? Khalsa or something like that. Okay, Khalistan. Okay, it's a real toolkit for science students. Serious one. So you can see that these are carbon tapes on which you can mount your samples, and this is a roll of you will find these things always in the SEM room. Aluminum tape, copper tape, you can buy these things also. So normally I don't spend a lot of time on these images. You can see that this is by Ted Pella company. You can barely notice it, but as you can see, Ted Pella is a very famous company, American company. This is colloidal graphite, okay? And they charge a lot of money, so you can make it in the lab and you can sell it. It's a conductive ink made of graphite particles, and this is colloidal silver. They sell it very expensively. I purchased for small bottle from somebody, 10,000 rupees, I think. Some Japanese company. Sometimes many companies give it to me for free for testing purposes. Okay, so this is another your toolkit. This Hemant or somebody, I think Hemant, he asked this question. So you can see that you have to keep separate stuff for microscopy. Okay, so you can see all kinds of stuff. So this is your toolkit. So this is going to be the last topic of today's lecture, and you have a good news that I won't be probably teaching on coming Wednesday and Friday, and probably next week. Not because I'm going to Goa to sit on the beach and watch sunset, but I'll be studying and working with my bunch of students because I have to give a training program next week from next Monday uh, on another device, another tool, and many people from all over India and abroad, they have registered. So we have to. Okay, so I have
Sir,
to.
can unregistered student can join?
You can join, but you have to pay 500 rupees. So
Sir,
guide can reimburse.
without paying and as unregistered?
Like I don't think you would see. Let me the topic which I was I promise you to, so this is becoming a blessing uh, for when we are faced a challenge. The challenge is uh, about sample environment, because we would like to image samples without giving harsh vacuuming. For example, a cell, a biological cell, you would like to image as such. And normally what we do for biological samples, that we fix them. I mean, when fixing means you use glutaraldehyde, and then, I mean, you might have heard about this kind of treatment to the bodies in the mortuary. They put a coating of these aldehydes. So what happens that the top layer does not, of course, I mean, they dip, I think, I'm not sure, but I think they might be dipping the entire body in that solution. So if they're doing so, cells get the top, that, the protein, the biopolymers get cross-linked. So that cellular structure does not change. So body does not uh, deform, uh, actually. Okay, so that's the trick. But uh, if you want to study the objects in the native environment, so this is the technique which was developed, and it's a beautiful technique actually. And so now this is already, the question is already clear, that why do we need environmental SEM? And there are many samples you don't want to put them under high vacuum. And so how it is different than SEM? So basically, the entire column is still in the high vacuum, because you cannot. Uh, I think some of you already answered this question long back. I think several classes back, that uh, electron column has to be held under high vacuum, because otherwise electrons won't be able to reach to the sample, because they will get scattered off from the molecules, even tiny amount of molecular concentration. What they do, they put actually a series of pressure limiting apertures. What I mean to say, that they start increasing the, for example, if you see that here it is, the pressure is quite uh, low. So basically it's a high vacuum, ultra high vacuum, 10⁻⁻⁷, and then they start uh, increasing the pressure step by step. They put the pressure limiting apertures. So you can see there is an ion pump, and so they relax these conditions. Actually, you can see that it has come down to 10⁻⁵. Otherwise, entire column is held at one, I mean, at the same vacuum, but not here. So they, and in a series, uh, they start reducing the uh, vacuum. So you can see that for -4, -3, and the sample environment is actually held at 10 to the power, I mean, sorry, the 10 torr, with the all kinds of valves and gauges. You start, okay. Anyway, but let's look at the science. So what I told you, that ESM, you do not need to quote the sample. How it is possible that the trick is simple, that when you bombard this primary electron D onto the sample, so there is, so basically, obviously you will be ejecting out lots of electrons, secondary electrons or backscattered, whatever it is. They will ionize the gas. So you have now a lot of gas molecules. Okay, you can see that G written here. So you have lots of gas molecules, and so what will happen when these high energy electrons kick those gas molecules? They will just rip them apart, and they will ionize them, right? So those gas molecules get ionized. So what I mean to say, that there will be positively charged, part of nuclei, floating around here and there, and then there will be electrons. So you have basically two parts, like you have positive and negative. Now, what will happen, that this positively charged particles will form an immediate coating, because they will get attracted, they will start getting attracted towards this negatively charged specimen, because specimen is non-conducting, because you did not coat anything. So it will accumulate negative charge, there will be charging. Now this charging will be neutralized by this positive charge. So it's basically inbuilt neutralization. And these electrons will be easily, they will escape and reach to the detector. Second thing will happen, that one electron will multiply and will generate, suppose there is one electron is being ejected from your sample which you want to detect. Now this electron will generate several more electrons. So that means there is an amplification, built-in amplification of signal also. There are two things which you are doing easily, but you compromise on the resolution. That's the only compromise you do. I don't see any other compromise. So you can see that you have killed two birds with one stone. It's not, I mean, normally I don't use this phrase because I love birds, and I don't, I mean, I'm a naturist, so, but it's a very bad phrase, not to be used, violent phrase. But anyway, so basically you are killing two targets or whatever you can call it, not birds. So this is beautiful technique actually, and this is there at NCL since long time. You can see that being broadly used. I'll not go into the text. You can read it, but I already gave you the concept, and you can, if you are a biologist or polymer scientist, or you just want to, you are a naturist like me, and you caught some nice beetle or cockroach or some butterfly wings during your nature walk, and you want to image it, so you can do that nicely here. Somebody asked this question whether these images have colors. These are all false colors. This actually, okay, these are all false colors. All these colors are false. There is no color in the images. There's only more electrons or less electrons. That's the only information we have, and you can put this information into any color. That is your choice. You can put this. I'll teach you in on hands-on if I teach AFM, because AFM is down, so I'm not sure whether I should teach AFM. But in AFM, generally, I show how the color, the image analysis hands-on. I normally teach that. Anyway, so you can see all these are all fake colors. Yeah, and this is beautiful. Yeah, this is beautiful sample. Polystyrene. These are all polystyrene particles. Almost spherical particles. These are actually spherical particles because these are large size, so you can easily make them spherical. And these are all amorphous. These are particles are amorphous, but they are assembled in a crystalline assembly. Okay, that does not mean that each polystyrene bead is is crystalline. It's not crystalline. But you can see that you can make models. For example, you take some tennis balls and make a lattice out of that. But you can image those. So these polystyrene beads are popularly used for all kinds of experiments and assemblies. I think if there is any chemical engineer among you, you might have a lot of knowledge about that. But these are very good model systems. Last topic for today is focused ion beam system. It's a beautiful technique. It's there at NCL since a long time. It's amazing tool. I will tell you something that very simply about this technique, without much effort, you can understand. For example, you might have seen people who make these monolith sculptures. They take a piece of marble, stone, large stone, and they start chiseling out a beautiful statue out of that large stone. So focused ion beam is essentially the same thing. So you can bombard this beam onto the sample, and you can chisel out. You can fabricate new things. For example, you take this is your sample, so you can suppose you want to make a conical thing, so you can put it in electron microscope, and you can make this something like this or some more complex design. And advantage is that you see, I mean, here in contrast to the sculpture artist making a statue which you can see from your eyes, sometimes if these dimensions are in microns, you can't see those things, right, from your eyes when it is being designed. So you can see, and as well as you can modify the these objects using this focused ion beam. So with the ion beam is basically mostly it's made of gallium. Okay, it's a gallium beam which is used and which is bombarded, high energy gallium beam inside the SEM. So in SEM there are two columns. One column usually you know that this is electron beam column which is bombarding electrons, right? You can use it for imaging and all kinds of chemical analysis purposes. And there is another beam side by side which is used for bombarding. Another very beautiful use of this sample is, suppose you have a thick sample and you have made for example, you went to this hill behind your hostel, if you have seen NCL, and you found some rock sample, or you might have made some composite structure in your lab, and you know that there is a gradation in the stoichiometry when you go depth-wise. For example, you have some specimen where you have more vanadium here and more chromium here. So how do you know what is the chemical composition depth-wise? What you do, you start you do the chemical analysis and topographic analysis of top layer, remove it, do it here, remove it, do it here, remove it, remove. So you can start peeling off these layers from the sample, and you can expose fresh sample and do your chemical analysis there. Third use, if you do not want this depth analysis, okay, another beautiful thing is that you can just even bombard it just to clean up. Suppose you have all your fingerprint and all khasi, cheek, all kinds of things, on your sample. You can remove it in situ. You have fresh sample which is not contaminated by you. So it will be available and you can image it nicely. Okay. So there's not much difference, and it's very simple technique. So this is gallium source, and because it's the ion, these are ions, so you use the same magnetic lenses. These are positively charged ions, but you can just bombard it here, and it's very simple. No need to. It's not complicated.
Sir,
Yes, ma'am.
I am unsure. Will that peeling off doesn't change have any change upon the sample,
Yes or no, basically. Suppose it depends upon how. So basically, you will have obviously gallium contamination, okay, because you're bombarding gallium. So you can. So there will be obviously some implantation of gallium ions, but you know that the gallium is because of you're bombarding it. So that is one problem which I see. Another problem is if you're not very careful, so these gallium ions can enter inside and then create like a tracks. It's very powerful technique which physicists use actually. Physicists are physicists have a very large accelerator in Delhi, which we used to call Nuclear Science Center, where we intentionally bombard to create disorder into the system, and we do a lot of crazy things there to intentionally modify. But the beam energy is not that high to do damage. These things are taken care of actually. So these beam energy and intensity are carefully controlled, not to damage, but there's basically constructive damage rather than a damaging damage. Yeah. So
Okay, sir.
yeah. So you can do very interesting thing actually. Believe me, it is. You can see the some kind of this is basically strawberry ice cream. Hmm? Prepared inside the scanning electron microscope, and you can eat it. But only thing is that it is made with steel, stainless steel. Yeah. I'm joking. These are all false color. You can see that how beautiful you can. Um, uh, but NCL students may not be interested in doing these things unless you are an engineer. You can, for example, you can make Fresnel lens. You can make, in fact, a grating inside SEM. You can make grating and you can do. But chemistry students will be interested definitely the depth uh, profiling of compositional analysis, because there is EDAX detector built in. So you can use the power of EDAX detector and you can peel off layer by layer and you can expose the fresh area. So now you can see that there is a fixed beam and there is an SEM. So you can use uh, power of both to simultaneously image and see. So there is no need to go into detail about the engineering aspect, because that is not that's not the purpose. So I think I should end it here. And next lecture is going to be on X-ray spectroscopy, which I have already taught, but I will go into detail. And believe me, it will answer a lot of your chemistry questions that suppose we have in a sample, uh, why we can't do boron, why we can't see carbon, why we can't see nitrogen, or how we can see fluorides or fluorine, or maybe sodium, like all these low Z elements. And I will tell you in detail about X-ray spectrometers, their limitations, advantages, what to do, what not to do, how to do the analysis, what precautions, what kind of spectra you get, and what are the problems which students normally, they do a lot of. See, this is the technique which is. I will tell you, and my own PhD students. You are also all my students, but my own PhD students in my group, they know that I always complain that this is the most abused tool by NCL students actually, and students world over. And even if I teach them, they end up doing wrong calculation of uh, atomic percentages. Okay, so that is so we'll learn some lessons, and though it is so that's why it deserve uh, one separate class. Though I would have hurried up and uh, finished few slides here and there today itself, but I thought um, not to do that. Yes, Harsh, you can.
Good evening, sir.
Hi, good evening, Harsh. Nice to see you today.
Yes, sir. Sir, लास्ट क्लास में नहीं आया तो असाइनमेंट वगैरह जमा करना था इसलिए सॉरी.
Okay, no, you are actually a BSc final year students, and your criticism making me also enthusiastic.
Sir, my doubt is that as you said that secondary electrons are very good for topography, as you have